All right, we're back with Logan and Nastya, and we're going to turn our attention now to solving problems using the ArcPro GUI in the example that we used, which was to find populations within certain distances of vaccination sites in the state of Maryland. So what was that like using ArcPro to solve that problem, especially all 9 steps that we had, right? So there's a lot of hoops that we had to jump through to get what seemed like a really simple question, but when you get into it, it's like, yeah, there's a little more to this than I had actually thought.
Yeah, I think comparing it to ArcMap, there are some advantages, and then just in general, regardless of the two pieces of software, there's disadvantages as well. You know, the 64-bit operating component is really beneficial in processing performance, but if you look at the 9 steps, it's a procedural methodology, and there's just disadvantages to that in general.
Right, just a lot of balls to keep moving, and
yeah.
I found, you know, especially since we use blocks in Maryland, there's 100,000 of them. So when you're doing these table joins, it happened quickly. When I redid some of it in ArcMap, I was like, yeah, some of these joins were taking a long time, and then once the data was joined, and then doing an overlay with it and selecting features, that took a really long time. I noticed in Pro, it just went a lot faster.
Yeah, at first I worked with Census a lot, and in the beginning when we started using the ArcGIS Pro, I was like, is it really done there? Because it took very short amount of time, because I remember in ArcMap it took a lot of time. But it's methodology.
Yeah.
Repeating every 9 step can be challenging. But as far as searching goes, they have a very nice navigational bar tool, and you can find any analysis tool that you need very easily.
Yeah, and I found, again, as we talked about in the previous video, just everything being bigger, at least for me as I get older, I could just read it. You know, so I type in something, and the IntelliSense worked out really well.
Right.
One of the things that surprised me were some of the online tools now that Pro offers, right? So we were looking at straight line distance, you know, Euclidean distance from vaccination sites, but they now have this button that lets you just do routing, right? And you don't have to bring in a route network. So it was like, well, we're now actually able to find everybody who lives within 5 minutes of a vaccination site or 5 miles, and we're able to account for traffic. And that's something really new, I think, that ESRI did really well as they've moved ArcPro into more of a corporate model, is it's grabbing these Google-like tools and using them really easily.
It's kind of predicting what users might want to do with this type of data.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's moving the GIS user from the real nuts and bolts, I know how to build my own routing network, to, like you said, everybody wants to route. So ArcGIS now has a button to do that, and you can now answer your questions based on linear distances along a network, which I really liked. How often do you use just the GUI? Because you talked a little bit about, you know, all these steps. Is that something like you fire up ArcPro and then you just solve a question and go away, or what percentage of your time are you just using the GUI commands?
I mean, daily. Even if it's just a proof of concept for a piece of code or a model that I'm going to build, usually run through the GUI once just to have, again, that proof of concept. Am I selecting the right elements, and is my query correct, or did I forget to do new selection? Am I adding to that previous selection? And it seems kind of elementary, but even after, you know, nearly a decade of being in this professional environment, we all make mistakes. So just having it in the GUI first is confirmation of, you know, this is going to work when I go to script this thing, and then I can just worry about the code later on and know that my automation is going to be sound.
I agree, and also I like the GUI because sometimes you can read the information about the tool you're using and make sure that you're implementing all the right environment parameters and everything like that. Whenever I start using some analytical stuff, I do use the GUI first.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've even done that even when writing Python, which we'll talk about later. It's like, this Python command's not working because it's my problem. But I go back to the GUI and it's like, okay, this should work, and I can see how, and then that helps me maybe fix it. So I agree with, as a proof of concept, going through each of the individual steps, although tedious, is probably the best way to prove to myself I can solve this problem.
Right.
And then I can think about other ways to solve it, you know, in a more efficient manner. That's right.
Yeah, and when we start talking about Python, there's some tools have a lot of variables or a lot of parameters built into them, and without really understanding each component of that tool's input, sometimes just running through the GUI helps you understand, you know, if I'm running some raster analytics, what are the interpolation method options and what do those mean? And a lot of times there's little help prompts built within the GUI tools, which are really nice.
Yeah.
I think GUI sometimes make you look into your data in more details than the scripting does, because you're just thinking, okay, I have this data. When you write the script, I'm just going to use it. But when you're using the GUI, you first look at your data a little bit in more details, just because it's asking you to.
Right, you get down to a more granular
Yeah.
level. That's true. So you're really understanding, what command to use, how does it work, and how does it respond in different situations. Well, great. Well, good luck as you try to work through this problem using the ArcGIS Pro GUI. And the next thing we'll do after that is look at Model Builder.